Well, good evening and welcome to the proceedings of the Grand Rapids Public Schools Board of Education. This evening is Monday, March 1st. Happy March. Ms. Lewis, will you please call the roll?
Yes, Ms. Lewis is here. Reverend Matias? Reverend Matias? I know you're here, but you're not on yet, but.
I'm sorry, I'm here.
Okay. Mr. Ross is excused. Mrs. Williams?
Present.
Dr. Baker's excused. Ms. Davis?
Here.
Dr. Flores?
Present.
Ms. Grant?
Here.
And President Chutke?
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you, Ms. Lewis. May I please have a motion for approval of this evening's agenda?
So moved.
Support.
Thank you. All in favor say aye.
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 All opposed, same sign. Motion carries. All right, first this evening are our celebrations. Dr. Roby, please take it away.
I apologize. That was not it was an edit related to that. The person that we were recognizing is not available this evening, and so we will be celebrating her next month. I apologize for not updating the board.
Very good. We'll move on to the secretary's report then. Ms. Lewis. Ms. Lewis, you're on mute.
Follow my role model, John Matias here, right? For those interested in our board meetings and the Zoom virtual meetings, please go to the district's website and click on Notice of Regular and Special Board Meetings to obtain this information, and all the information concerning our meetings will be posted at the District Office Administration Building. There will be an Academic Achievement Committee on Wednesday, March 3rd at 4:30. There's a City Board Liaison Committee that will meet on March 12th, Friday at 11 a.m. And the Legislative Committee will be meeting on Friday, March 12th at 3 p.m. That is my report.
Thank you, Ms. Lewis. Next are our committee chair updates. First is Finance Committee. Reverend Matias, do you have an update this evening?
We'll be presenting some things for our approval this evening, and so I'll let Mr. Oldburst guide us in that as well. But a robust meeting, lots of interesting challenges financially, but hopefully we'll get through it.
All right, thank you, Reverend Matias. Policy Committee, Ms. Lewis, do you have an update, or do you want to wait until the policy reading? You're on mute again, Ms. Lewis.
There. No, I don't have a formal one. I'll discuss the policies that we introduce.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. On to our superintendent's report. Back to you, Dr. Roby.
All right, happy March, and it begins. March is when we celebrate Achievement of Women. This is Women's History Month. Our team will highlight women's contributions across the Grand Rapids community, as well as GRPS specifically, over the next 31 days. And I do stand corrected. There was an actual celebration, and so when Dr. Gorman comes on, he's going to do a little bit of a celebration related to I Love to Read Month. There's always a focus on sharing good books with children. Tonight, as far as our executive cabinet presentations, they're each going to provide a brief overview. I'm going to give you the overview of the legislative luncheon, which was a virtual luncheon with several board members, elected officials, and members of our building and district leadership levels. We had the opportunity to share our district priorities, including items that have impact on our district at present and what we anticipate the impact will be in the future. The quick overview of our legislative priorities for the district included equitable and adequate funding. This is especially for our COVID kind of related funding, as the Michigan legislator needs to establish a needs-based formula for the social emotional supports for all districts across our state. We're asking that they quickly pass the federal coronavirus relief, allowing districts to begin implementing plans as we are starting to kind of roll into plans for the end of this year and the startup of the next school year, and we need to kind of know what those dollars and funds will actually be. Critical shortage, that actually has been resolved and addressed during our lame duck session, and what that allowed for was more flexibility of bringing back retired teachers and school leaders in a temporary capacity without having retirement benefits negatively impacted. So we allow those leaders and teachers to come back into school organizations across our state as we have some shortages. The fourth item is educator evaluation. We are asking to temporarily suspend the growth component for evaluations for this current school year. And then the final item as part of our legislative priorities is the Read by Third Grade law. We had presentations from a building principal and teacher, and we're asking again to temporarily suspend the retention component because we know that that has impact as our students over the last year have been doing school in a very different way. Dr. Gorman will provide an update around our Return to Learn plan and those continued engagement efforts with our stakeholders, and then Mr. Helmholt will provide a strategic planning update for board members, and then finally, Larry Oberst will provide a COVID-19 funds update. So, Craig, will you please invite Dr. Gorman into our meeting?
We all set, Dr. Roby? Okay, thank you. Good evening, President Schottky, Board of Education members, and Dr. Roby. Before I begin, I'd like to start with a celebration. Tomorrow is National Read Across America Day. You should have all received a link from Mr. Helmholt. We would really like you to read to our students tomorrow, either virtually or in person. We're asking you to do this as well as other elected officials from the region. So we're super hopeful that you can do that. Next up, we want to make you aware of the One Book, One City initiative. This is the initiative where all fifth graders in the region are reading the same book. The title of the book this year is Front Desk by Kelly Yang. This is a 2021 selection. It's a story about courage, empathy, hope, and not giving in to fear. If you would like a copy of the book, please email me and I will make sure that I get one for you. Again, we're really excited about tomorrow and we are really hopeful that you will read to our students. Next, oops, I'm sorry, go ahead, please.
I received that note from Mr. Helmholt, but it said I would receive an email to set up time or something, and I didn't get that email.
I will have Mr. Helmholt follow up with you this evening, Ms. Lewis.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, no problem. Yep. So next up, of course, is the superintendent's report as it relates to our current Return to Learn plan. As you are well aware, right now we have two instructional models, one of which is a 100% virtual model, and the other is an AB hybrid model. With the AB hybrid model, of course, our students attend school in person on Monday and Tuesday with a Wednesday deep cleaning day, and then Group B goes on Thursday and Friday. At the current time, 42% of our students are participating 100% virtually, and 58% of our students are participating in the AB hybrid model. As we prepare for marking period 4, we have sought and we will be seeking input from you, our Board of Education, our teacher leaders, our principals, and our families to potentially modify our hybrid model to add more in-person time, potentially for the 4th marking period. Of course, we look forward to hearing feedback from all of you and our community members, and we look forward to potentially making adjustments if needed. At this time, I will answer any questions you may have about our current model.
Well, I read that the emails that we got concerning the public and what the public wants. And you know, what amazed me as I was going through this is it's kind of like 50-50. You know, that there are some people who feel really strongly that we should be back 5 days a week, and then others are very hesitant to send their kids back to school. And I was surprised when you mentioned those percentages, because my granddaughter, who is in 7th grade, there are only 7 kids in her class when she goes to school on Monday, which makes me very happy. But there must be a lot of museum kids who are doing it online. And I thought those percentages were quite striking, that more than half of the kids are going back to school, right? Is that what you said?
Well, sure. So if there are 7 students on the first half of the week, of course, they're probably close to that the second half of the week as well. So that's around 14 students.
Yeah.
You know, if a class size is around 30, that's about half of the students. So, you know, we believe, you know, if we went to having more students participate in person, we're putting kind of both cohorts together, you know, if that's what the board wants to do and the community wants to do, we believe we can do that. Still having those distance requirements that are recommended.
At all the schools, the high school and elementary and everything?
That is absolutely. Dr. Roby, please.
Yes, and so we plan on having some conversations around the specificity around that, what the grade configurations should be. And then, of course, each school and each building will look a little bit different because building sizes and classroom sizes vary.
And the executive directors and principals are, of course, going through all of the schools right now, just seeing what those classroom configurations are, of course, before we do anything definitively or propose anything definitively.
Okay.
Are there other questions for Dr. Gorman? All right.
Thank you, Dr. Gorman.
Ms. Davis, how did I do with my wait time, fellow teacher?
I think you sound like you're doing a good job.
All right.
Gave us a chance to think.
I will bring in Mr. Helmholtz, who will talk about the RFP for strategic planning. Thank you, Dr. G.
Good afternoon. Dr. Roby, President Shotke, members of the board. Dr. Roby asked me just to provide a quick update on the strategic planning. The good news is there is quite a buzz. We've been hearing a nice little buzz locally, but also on the national scene. One of our former national consultants was sharing that he saw a listserv that was buzzing about your strategic planning RFP. We've received a number of questions from different agencies. Those questions, as required by the RFP, are posted to the website. So anyone interested in seeing what those questions are, they're right on the website on the landing page for the RFP at the very bottom of it. We've already received 2 proposals to date. I just got one a few minutes ago from a local company, and we received another one from an out-of-state company. I'm aware of about a half dozen others that are interested and are expected, and we'll have to wait and see. The deadline is this Friday at noon. We will be processing the electronic versions and getting them to all the board members by close of business on Friday. And then, of course, you are scheduled to meet on Monday to discuss. And that's all I have as an update. Are there any questions?
Great, thank you for the update.
Thank you, Mr. Helmholtz. Mr. Griep, can you please bring in Mr. Larry Wilburst?
I think I'm here. Good evening, Madam President Shotke, Superintendent Dr. Roby, and board members. I was asked this evening to give an update on the COVID-19 funding, that funds we've received, funds we expect to receive, as I shared with the Finance Committee last Monday. Let me pull up here. On the screen here, just a second, give me, there. Everybody can see that in the screen? Spreadsheet, yes? All right, perfect. All right, as we've talked really the last 8 or 9 months, we got received a number of buckets of COVID-19 related funding since about July of last year. And let me just talk briefly on where we stand on these buckets of funding. This first small amount of $190,000 we got on our July state aid payment. That's part of the Federal CARES Act through the state of Michigan. That has been spent completely, and that was predominantly spent on clean supplies and PP&E, and that fund will be closed out, or is closed out now currently. The CARES Act, the ESSER funds, this is one of the bucket of dollars. We're going to call this ESSER 1 because I'll talk in just a few minutes about ESSER 2 and a potential ESSER 3. ESSER 1 was one of the funding buckets that we had to share a portion of it with the non-publics. Totaled almost $8 million. Our share is about $7.7 million. We are still spending that currently. Some of the areas we've spent so far related to, we actually acquired the new social studies curriculum from these funds, some additional costs related to translation costs, additional PPE, clean supplies, technology, both software and hardware, and then some custodial purchase services and the new transportation software, the Z-Pass, that we're using to better track our students. They get on and off buses. That has the COVID relief bill that was signed by the president just after Christmas, extended the due date to spend these funds from September of this year until September of next year. So September 30th of 2022. We're hoping to spend the remainder of these funds by the end of our fiscal year so we can close that out as we move into a new fiscal year with some additional funding that we'll have to keep track of. I will mention it's been somewhat of a challenge. Each of these buckets of dollars we have to keep track of separately and report on how we spend them separately. So it's been a bit of a administrative challenge for us, especially in the business office, as we're down a couple people because of budget cuts. The big bucket of dollars, the $350 per student, again, passed through the state on CARES Act money. We received that in our August state aid payment, so it had been in the bank since August. We are just about to finish spending those funds. Most of that has been spent on technology, both student and staff technology, a little bit of spending on PPE equipment and some custodial supplies and equipment. But again, we expect to finish that spending here the next 30 days, and that fund will be closed out. The Kent County funds that we received two allocation, the first being the 236,382, the second being the 122,611. It totals about $359,000. That has been has been closed out. That had a initial spending deadline of December 30th of 2020. The Relief Act I mentioned earlier that was signed just after Christmas actually extended the due date, spend date till December 30th of 2021. However, the county chose not to extend that due date beyond December of last year. Fortunately, we had enough expenditures to use that full $359,000, primarily on PP&E, some of the air purifiers we had to acquire for those 8 buildings that had deficient ventilation. Some of these funds were used to fund that also. So that has been closed out. The report filed with Kent County as required by the end of January. And so we are done with those Kent County funds. You may recall we were able, when this pandemic first hit last spring, we were able to reallocate and defer some of our Title I funding. So we took $800,000 of that and to reallocate it to student devices. And we spent all except for about $300,000 of that. That has a spend date of September 30th, 2022. We expect to spend that prior to the end of this fiscal year on additional technology needs. These last two buckets ESSER Education Equity Fund, GEAR funding, two other buckets that had to be shared with the non-public schools, Education Equity Fund, almost 1.6 million in total. Our share was $1.5 million. The GEAR funding, that's the governor's emergency fund, 1.55 million, and almost $1.5 million of that was for us. The GEAR funding, we actually, both of these buckets of dollars, as well as the ESSER 1, were application programs. So we had to file an initial application that included how we expected to spend that money. Not only us as GRPS, but the non-publics also. We've amended the ESSER application, I believe twice now. The ESSER Equity Education Fund, we're in the process of spending now. That's focused on some of our technology needs, our Schoology. We funded out of that. Some hotspots, the monthly service fee for hotspots, we're funding out of this. We expect to hire some additional mental health professionals. We've hired one of those individuals, a supervisor, and we're looking to add 2 more counselors from that funding bucket. The GEAR funding, the application was just finally approved after a couple of revisions early in February. So we have not spent much of those dollars yet. We expect to spend it on areas like connectivity, some more mental health services, teacher training, PD, other health and safety measures. Both the Equity Fund and the GEAR funding have a spend date that's been extended to September 30th of 2022, September 30th of 2022. Before I jump into the ESSER $2, any questions on these buckets of funding that we have been working on since last summer?
Mr. Oberst?
Yes.
I'm constantly hearing on the federal level that there's all this money out there and, why should they pass anymore? Because it's not been spent. Now, where is that money, that hasn't been spent? I mean, is it something the state's not giving us or? Well,
the CARES, these CARES Act funds, amounts came to the Kent County, this $350 per student in the state of Michigan. Now those dollars were given to us prior to any spending or so that we were put into our bank account and we could spend when we at will. What they've been primarily talking about, what you've heard about, Ms. Lewis, is the ESSER funds in particular. And this is a piece of the ESSER funds. And really the GEAR funding is that 10% holdback that state had. As I mentioned earlier, all 3 of those programs have an application that you have to apply for. And then once you spend the money, you have to apply for reimbursement. This ESSER $1, our district, like many districts, this has the most flexibility. We essentially can use ESSER $1 for any needs, any operational needs of the district also. So we have held those funds till the very end, so to speak. So where we have additional needs that are not met by these other buckets of dollars. So many of these dollars have not been spent yet for that reason, because people are, and plus initially these CARES dollars had a spending deadline of December 30th of 2020. And we didn't get these things until July, August. In the case of Kent County, our last allocation from Kent County, the 122, was in mid-December, and we had basically 2 weeks to spend it. So our focus, like many districts, was to spend these dollars that had a expiration date that was coming up pretty quickly, and then leave the ESSER funds until the end. Plus they had more flexibility.
So the state does not have more money that they're going to give us from the relief bill that was passed before Christmas or right after Christmas?
No. Those dollars have been allocated already. and they've been spent. Well, again, the state has, like ESSER 2, the state has the funds in their bank account, and once we apply for reimbursement, they'll disperse it to
Okay,
us,
okay.
which we're in the process of actually doing right now for a portion of that.
Okay.
Other questions?
And Larry, some of the things that we talked about in our meeting prior to this was in terms of the ESSER and some of the reporting out. So for example, you stated some of the mental health hiring or aspects of that, whether it would, the academic committee would get an update on really what some of those plans are in regards to some of the either new funding or kinds of approaches, at least financially, that we're getting, or opportunities. And so just wanted to make sure that the ball's being passed in terms of the committees hearing about these opportunities or how they're going to be used, and then what kind of plan can the board expect from Dr. Roby's team in regards to how those kinds of things are going to be put into action. The other is just a better understanding of how some of that funding goes to non-public schools, and just again, where does that get reported to? We gave X amount to X schools for X things, and how do they report back to us? So some of those kinds of questions that I would have in terms of fiscal responsibility.
Sure. And I'll just, briefly, the non-publics, they're included, we're responsible for the administration of the funds that go to them, reporting the funds. So they have to provide us how they want us. We go through and make the allocation to each individual non-public. And again, if you look at the Catholics and the Christian schools, each building is a separate entity. So each building provides us with how they want to spend their allocation. We submit that with our application in one application, and then they have to provide us, as they spend the money, they have to provide us a support for how they spend it. Obviously, it has to be spent according to the application that they provided us, and then we report that in the application back. The reimbursement comes to us, and then we turn around and reimburse the schools. So again, it's a bit of an administrative headache, but that's just the way it is. It's actually going to change for the better on the ESSER 2 allocations, and I can jump to that right now.
Larry, while you're doing that, I just want to make sure we answered the first question that Reverend Matthias
Sure.
asked about kind of what we're doing or how we're doing some planning, and just kind of talk a little bit about the task force work that's been in place, and then also kind of going forward in later this month.
Yeah, and I will do that as I talk about the ESSER 2 matrix, which everyone can see this on the screen now, right? The new spreadsheet. All right. Yeah, as Reverend Matisse, you and I chatted last week, what you asked about in your first question is primarily related to the ESSER 2 dollars and any ESSER 3 dollars that we may
Mr. Oberst, is this? I feel like I'm seeing the same.
Yeah, it is the same one.
Are you seeing the same one?
Yeah.
I think so, yeah.
Well, let me do this then. Thank you for that, Ms. Davis. This look different?
Yes.
ESSER 2 matrix, you see it? Perfect. All right. As I was saying, we actually, back in about September of last year, we put together a small task force to determine how to spend all those buckets of dollars we just talked about. And that task force was continued and actually expanded a bit as we became aware of the ESSER 2 dollars that are being allocated. Now, the ESSER 2 dollars, and actually just got a revision on last Friday. The ESSER 2 funds came about by, again, the same legislation that was signed just after Christmas. We're allocated $32.9 million, and that is based on the Title 1A methodology. The ESSER 2, just like ESSER 1, the state was in total got about 1.6, $1.7 billion. They had the ability to retain 10% of that, which they did. And then that 10%, they could determine how they wanted the school districts to spend that. So what has happened is the governor has taken some of that 10% dollars, and she's added about $300 million in total from the school aid fund, and to provide this governor's COVID relief bucket of money, if you will. Our portion of that's about 5.1 million. So in total, from the ESSER 2 allocations, we've got $38 million approximately that are being allocated to our district. Now, unfortunately, this is the money that's hung up right now in the state legislature. It needs to be allocated through a supplemental. And as you probably know, the state legislature is holding that up because they want some additional say, if you will, in the governor's directives regarding schools and being back in school, as well as the shutdown, if you will, or limitations on bars and restaurants. So even though the state got this money from the feds around the end of January, there's been no application process that has opened yet up for any of us, any school districts in the state of Michigan, pending what the legislature is going to do. Unlike the ESSER 1, there is a separate allocation for the non-publics. So this $38 million is all ours, and we don't have to deal with the administrative challenges of the non-public schools. They have their own pot of money specifically for them. So as we expanded that subcommittee I talked about, we broke potential spending buckets into about 7 different categories, and each of the categories had a team leader to start brainstorming areas that we could spend these dollars. As it stands now, all this full $38 million we can spend it starting whenever we get the money allocated to us up through September 30th of 2023. 2023, it's about 2.5 calendar years, but it actually spans 4 of our fiscal years. So part of the challenge of the subcommittee was trying to determine, over what time, the time frame to spend the money. We obviously have some immediate needs in certain areas to spend the dollars, but also to keep in mind what we might need down the road and try to hold some dollars out. One of the constants we found over the last year, this pandemic, is, and you've certainly been well aware of this as a board, we have done a lot of planning for all the changes that had to occur in the way we provide teaching and learning. And as much as we try to anticipate things, something always comes up. And we're always reallocating the current funds we had, and then we expect to do that going forward. So this ESSER 2 will be an application process again, and we can amend the application as needed. So here quickly are the buckets we looked at on the academic side, led by Ron Gorman. Areas to address learning loss assessment, remediation, any additional curriculum needs, additional needs for our ESL programs, looking at more robust after school programs, summer school programs, take a look at the art and phys ed, additional needs that those 2 particular areas may have, potentially tutor program, additional pre-K program and supports. And his committee has been working to determine some of those areas. And actually, I think an announcement came out today, if I'm not mistaken, about our summer success program, which will be an expanded summer program this year. And we've allocated preliminarily about $7 million to that particular bucket of funding of needs. Special ed area, and again, many of these areas you can overlap each other. Special ed, obviously, some of the things that Ron's committee will come up with will also impact our special ed students. But there's also some more unique needs that they may have. So Laura Lamore is a team leader onto special ed, an additional $300,000 for some specific needs they may have for our special ed students. Even though we spent, I don't know now, maybe $6 million or $7 million in technology over the last year to get to one-to-one and to upgrade our staff needs, we still, and we'll continue to have technology needs. Since we are back in the classroom, we're having Craig and his team look at the in-classroom technology. There's a wide variation depending on what building you're in and what classroom you're in, and some of that in-classroom technology. So he's going to look at that. There are a couple of groups of staff, the child care workers and the parapros that have not had devices refreshed, and so they will also get some additional devices. About $2 million have been allocated initially to the technology bucket. As you're well aware, we have significant facilities and operational needs, especially as it relates to ventilation. One of the new focus areas of ESSER 2, it's specific in the legislation, is that we can spend it on upgrades to HVAC systems or any other building needs to improve the health and safety of our students in the buildings. Now, you're well aware of, and we just had some meetings talking about the central innovation needs and HVAC needs there. Those other 8 buildings that don't have very good ventilation, where we put in some temporary portable units, we're looking at making some more permanent upgrades to those. We have some other needs to some of the other buildings that we talked a little bit about back at the work session in December. So Larry Johnson's a team leader, and his team is looking at all those potential needs. We've allocated about $15.2 million to that. Again, keep in mind, it's a big number, but it's over, as I mentioned, a 4-year fiscal year time frame. We still will have continued needs in our health area, both physical health, mental health, and the socio-emotional. Mel Atkins and his team will be looking at additional student physical and mental health needs and services, additional social and emotional needs of students, mental health needs of staff, and potentially, depending on the guidelines, when we finally get the application process, maybe additional health needs. We can spend some dollars for parents and families and guardians. Keep in mind the educators, my colleague educators have, and I'm sure you know this too as board members, they talked about, the learning loss area here and the social, emotional, mental health needs. These are long-term, going to be long-term fixes. We're not going to get everyone back up to speed in 9 months, 12 months. As well as socio-emotional. We had deficiencies in programs prior to the pandemic. Those needs have increased significantly, and they're not going to go away in a short period of time. So $2.5 million initially been allocated to additional programs there that Mel and his team are working on right now. Professional development, again, it's a focus area, the ESSER $2, one of the focus areas they mentioned. Eric Harmson, his professional development team, will be looking at additional PD needs. Some of the areas to look at, additional needs really to hybrid learning, use of technology, use of any new curriculum or new online tools. One of the suggestions in the legislation with health and safety protocols as those continue to change and are updated. $300,000 is the initial allocation for Eric and his team. And then these ESSER $2, like ESSER 1, we have a wide range of flexibility. The last guiding, overall guiding principle of ESSER 2 was we could use it to spend on any operating needs of the district to enable us to pay our employees and our contractors. So we are hopefully looking at some of these dollars as an opportunity over the next 3 years to add to our fund balance. This 10.7 million is kind of what's left over the 38. Many you are all aware of the cuts that we thought we were going to have to make back in June. And let me tell you, that was just a very difficult process we all went through because our fund balance wasn't sufficient to withstand many of those of the decreased funding. So we're hoping to get the fund balance up to a more 10%, which is the board policy. And we can do with these ESSER dollars, all things being equal. The governor's proposal for next year's budget that came out a couple of weeks ago also looks positive in terms of ongoing state funding. So that is what we are working on and will continue to work on. Again, these are general areas we can get moving on until we get further guidance from the state. You know, we don't know specifically if all these areas we're able to spend the dollars on, but at this point, I think we can, and that is our direction right now. I got one more quick comment. I'll come back for questions on this in just a minute. There is, as you know, making its way through the legislature in Washington, the Biden administration's COVID relief plan. $1.6 trillion in total. There's a ton of dollars allocated for K through 12 education on a national basis. As a legislation is drafted now and the estimates for the state of Michigan and for us as Grand Rapids Public Schools, again, right now, the ESSER, we're going to call it ESSER 3 if it gets through Congress. ESSER 3 will also be allocated based on a Title 1A allocation formula. And the estimate for us right now is 80.8 million, 80.8 million. 32, almost 33 million with ESSER 2. This is more than 2 times that. That would have a spending deadline basically from when the legislation is passed and signed into law until September 30th of 2024, September 30th of 2024. So internally, we're taking this, again, the subcommittee that's been in place, making some tweaks to that, and we'll be starting to spend some more time brainstorming on areas that we could spend $80 million. As you're all aware, we've certainly been we've talked since I've been around the underfunding that's occurred at the state level. If we get almost 81 million additional dollars in addition to what we already have, it's a good opportunity for us to make up some of those deficiencies in programming that we've had over the last number of years. And so we're at the direction of Dr. Roby, we'll be working very diligently over the next several weeks to start putting some additional brainstorming ideas for the ESSER 3 allocation. Let me just take a pause here and answer any questions anybody may have on ESSER 2 or ESSER 3.
I have one.
Yes.
Oberst, can any of this money be spent on like rewarding the teachers or doing anything for the teachers?
The answer is yes. I mean, the ESSER dollars, as I said, we have the ability to really spend it on anything. The one thing we have to be careful of, folks, I didn't mention this earlier, but I'll mention it now with the question you asked, Ms. Lewis, is if we get the ESSER 3, as I just said, that those funds go through September 2024. We don't want to build any structural costs that we can't withstand after the funding dries up. We'd like to all think that by 2024, this pandemic is long behind us, things are back to normal, and any additional funding is done. At that point, we're on our own again. So we've got to be very careful in we build into our cost structure, because we need to be able to sustain it once these funding dollars expire, either in 2023 or 2024.
I was thinking more of a one-time bonus or something like that. that wouldn't be something we had to sustain.
Yeah, I mean, there's ways you can do that, but also understand that with all of our employees, or many of our employees are all part of unions. And any compensation plan has to be negotiated.
We want to also make sure that we have guidance around how dollars are being spent, and to the point of, do we want to create a structure that is not sustainable? And so hence why Larry kind of unpacked kind of the brainstorming around what work programmatically can be used. And then also there are some other kind of opportunities to support, but we don't want to, we want to make sure that we're, first of all, supporting students and programs across our district first and foremost, and then looking at what other needs there are. And so we are doing continual development of this particular program that's being shared, and we'll also make sure that we keep the board informed as to updates as far as our progress.
Well, I seem to believe that, you know, yes, we should focus in on our kids and our programs and so on, but it is the responsibility of these teachers to see that all that stuff goes well, you know, the programs go well, that they reach out to the kids. And, you know, I'm just so impressed by all the work these people are doing that I just would like to see maybe just a one-time bonus or something, so that the teachers would know, and the other employees who've made a lot of sacrifices over the past year, that we would like to reward them in some way and let them know that we appreciate how difficult this has been for all of them.
Yeah, I certainly understand the emphasis, Ms. Lewis. You are absolutely correct that the lift of this last year has been extraordinary from every person that has functioned in this district. And I appreciate the extraordinary lift that managing these buckets of funds has been for our administrative office. We can explore opportunity for ways to recognize and appreciate staff, absolutely. But I want to let the financial office have an opportunity to think that through because it is very nuanced, as you know, and we want to make sure that we have equitable ways to do that. So thank you so much for your comment, and of course your support of teachers, and I certainly agree with you on that point.
I do want to just remind Ms. Lewis and the rest of the board that I think I talked about this a few months ago, but actually just in February, all the teachers got the direct heroes payment from the state of Michigan. It was $500 in recognition of the, and then support staff got $250, and those checks were sent out directly from Treasury last month. So there always, I mean, there has been some acknowledgement already at the state level of that Ms. Lewis. So.
Well, I'm glad to hear that. I'm very pleased.
Yeah. Any other questions for Mr. Oberst?
That concludes my portion of superintendent updates. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. All right, we are moving forward into our action items. First is our purchasing agenda. Are there any questions about the purchasing agenda? Okay, hearing none, may I have a motion for approval, please?
Motion to approve the purchasing agenda.
Support.
All right, thank you. Ms. Lewis, will you please call the roll?
Yes, can you tell me who made the motion?
I heard Davis, Ms. Davis, and then Dr. Flores.
And I will take the roll. Okay, Ms. Lewis, yes. Reverend Matias?
Yes.
Mr. Ross is excused. Mrs. Williams?
Yes.
Mr. Baker is excused. Ms. Davis?
Yes.
Dr. Flores?
Yes.
Ms. Grant?
Yes.
President Chaki?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Next action item is Board Bylaw 1300, electronic meetings, presentation of the first reading. Ms. Lewis, do you have
Yes.
an
I do
explanation?
have an explanation. Thank you, Sharon Pitts. We discussed this at our last meeting, and this is something that the state is requiring us to do, but we have to do it. So this is the policy. The legislature has passed this and the governor has signed it, that outlines the requirements for electronic board meetings. So this policy provides that the board may hold electronic meetings for any reason before March 31st. After March 31st and through December 31st of 2021, the board may only hold an electronic meeting if there is a local state of emergency or a state of disaster in the area where the board usually holds its meeting, or if holding the in-person meeting would risk the personal health and safety of the board. This policy also allows individual board members to attend an in-person meeting electronically under certain circumstances. So from March 31st to December 31st of 2021, a board member may attend a meeting electronically if there is a medical condition that prevents attendance, has military duty, or their attendance would risk the person's health and safety of the board or the public. But this is all under a state of emergency. We would not have to follow all of this. But after December 31st, 2021, only a board member who's absent for military duty may attend an in-person board meeting electronically. And finally, the policy outlines the procedures that must be implemented if the board holds an electronic meeting or if the board member attends an in-person meeting electronically. And these include certain notices and requirements for in the minutes. So.
Very good. Any questions?
My understanding then, President Shaki, would be that after the 31st, we would be having our meetings in person someplace where we will social distance and so on.
Yes, you're correct. So our administrative team is going to begin working on where is the best place for us to meet so that we are accessible by the public. And I'll be communicating that with all of you so we can prepare, assuming that the health orders are lifted. All right, any other questions? Okay, can I have a motion for approval of this first reading?
Motion to approve first reading.
Support.
All right, Ms. Lewis, please call the roll.
Yes. Ms. Lewis, yes. Reverend Matias?
Yes.
Mr. Ross is excused. Mrs. Williams?
Yes.
Dr. Baker is excused. Ms. Davis?
Yes.
Dr. Flores?
Yes.
Ms. Grant?
Yes.
President Jackie?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Next is our consent agenda grouping. Any discussion or questions? If not, may I have a motion for approval, please?
Motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved.
Support. Who was that support? I do this just in case Julie needs it.
Reverend Matias, I believe, was the second, I think.
Sometimes she asks me and I want to make sure I have the right answers here. Or I could just put in anybody. Nobody will know.
Lewis, we want to get it right, of course. Thank you.
Yes, we do. Okay, Ms. Lewis, yes. Reverend Matias?
Yes.
Mr. Ross is excused. Mrs. Williams?
Yes.
Dr. Baker is excused. Ms. Davis?
Yes.
Dr. Flores?
Yes.
Ms. Grant?
Yes.
President Jackie?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you, Ms. Lewis. Next is our discussion item, which is just the upcoming meeting topics. So just quickly wanted to do a reminder and refresher on the next two board meetings we have. So next week, Monday, March 8th, is our work session at 5:30 p.m. As a reminder, we are going to receive the proposals from the firms that have submitted for our strategic planning work. We'll receive those on Friday afternoon and have the weekend to review them, also Monday during the day. We will select firms to interview during our March 8th work session. So please make sure that you have a chance to look at those proposals over the weekend and be prepared, to move forward a few of those firms for interview. We're also going to look at the characteristics for evaluation for our superintendent this oncoming year and vote to approve those characteristics. So that's the agenda for the work session on the 8th. Of course, a few things could pop up between now and then, so pay attention to board docs for that. And then March 15th, just a reminder that we're going to hold a special work session at 4:30, beginning at 4:30, to interview those firms that we select on the 8th. We will then vote on the firm that we're going to work with for our strategic planning during the board meeting that day at 6:30. So 2 full meetings coming up over the next 2 weeks. A very exciting time for our district. Any questions? Great. We have no public comment this evening, so we can move into our superintendent's comments. Dr. Roby.
Hello again. Just very quickly, I want to say congratulations to our school and team leaders for a successful virtual school expo. As everyone knows, each school hosted families and students sharing kind of the flavor of their programs. We saw lots of innovation, creativity, very inviting for our teams and our potential new families that may join our district. We have received lots of valuable feedback, and we plan to incorporate ideas that have been shared with us in an upcoming expo taking place after spring break. I'd also like to invite parents and potential parents of GRPS to take a look at our schools and see why this is the district where you want to be. Come see all the terrific programs and options that are available for children and for your children. Thank you again to our teachers who have continually done an awesome job of developing online curriculum and instructional methodologies to keep students engaged, both in the online structure as well as in the socially distant classes when they are doing both at the same time. We want to share what their work has looked like, and Dr. Gorman and the academic team plan on doing a short presentation later this week so that you're able to see teachers in this structure and what learning actually looks like. And then we will also share that information with the full board at a later date. So kudos to our teaching teams as well as our leadership team for your hard work. And that concludes my comments for this evening. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Dr. Roby. Board member comments. Ms. Williams, can I start with you tonight?
No comment.
Very good. Dr. Flores.
Just pleased with the direction of the district office and teachers that are putting in their effort to make sure that our kids are catching up on their learning outcomes. And I'm very hopeful with the new funding that we have that there'll be greater emphasis on reducing some of those achievement gaps that we've experienced because of COVID.
Thank you, Dr. Flores.
Ms.
Yes,
Lewis.
I would like to echo what Dr. Roby just said about the teachers and the staff at all levels. I continue to be amazed by the work that's done. And I would also like to thank, and I imagine this has something to do with Mr. Helmholtz and probably Mr. Atkins, because we received those emails tonight with all of that information. And the only complaint I have is it's so small, I can't read it, but all of the parents' comments and all of those things, I found that extremely interesting. And I think that kind of information will help us make better decisions for the kids. And, you know, it's nice to make our parents happy as well. So thank you, whoever did that. That was wonderful. I was glad to have that information.
All right, thank you, Ms. Lewis. Reverend Matthias.
Yeah, I'm really blown away at how the depth of effort that has been put in order to meet our kids' needs. It's been so stressful for families that I talk to, just juggling so many things. The other thing is, I am so grateful for the integrity of this board. I'm sure that we've heard news of how other boards have spoken about their constituents. It's just, I have to say that we have a board that is committed to its constituents and its teachers, and certainly its administration. And so I really appreciate the tug of war that we have at making decisions, but also really believing and trusting in our overall system. And I hope that we continue to grapple with some issues that are coming before us. So I really appreciate the hard work that you all put. Thanks.
All right, thank you, Reverend Matthias. Ms. Grant?
No comments tonight.
All right, and Ms. Davis?
Yeah, I think I would just like to wish all of our teachers and administrators good luck with this month. It's a super busy month for schools with March is Reading Month and conferences and music in our schools, and so many things happen in March. And I know everyone's working super hard. Having 3 kids in the district, I have teachers that are willing to take text messages with all of the questions for all of the different avenues. I have 1 student doing the hybrid and 2 still are virtual. And our teachers are just so flexible. And I hope that they're taking care of themselves, and I wish them just some peace and some breath, conferences especially.